By now you may be thinking it's not just the choir that's got a touch of spring fever. You may be thinking from the pictures that Charlie's been showing down in Old Fellowship Hall that others of us have been feeling that as well. I just would like to get out the true word on what happened last weekend when it was 9 degrees. Yes, I did take the polar plunge. I did not do it alone. There were other people who did it with me. You know who you are. I won't name names, but they are pictured down there. And no, this is not a sign of mental incompetence on my part. No, the interim has not lost a screw. No, I had really good reasons for doing what I did when I went out there and jumped into that retaining pond. And so maybe you'd like to hear what they are. Okay, just I'll explain what that was. I'm from a part of the world where, whether right or wrong, we were told that winter is one of the ways God uses to raise the overall IQ of the area. Okay? When winter comes, I was told as a child, all the silly people go south and all the smart people stay behind. Now, I could be wrong, but that's the way it was justified for me. I was told when I was growing up that there are more important things than your comfort. There are more important things than putting on another layer of insulation. And that maybe you ought to pay attention to those kinds of things. And I take a great deal of comfort in the fact that another David, the one who wrote the psalm for us this morning, kind of believed the same thing. That psalm is a psalm about a guy who is not sitting in Tucson. He is not about a guy in San Diego. It is not about a guy who is sitting in a spiritual hot tub. This is a guy who is taking the plunge. This is a psalm of a guy who is being pursued by a mad king by the name of Saul, who is hiding out, who is worried that his pelt is going to get nailed to the barn door in Jerusalem. This is a guy who's having a hard time. And he doesn't try to pretend it's not. He doesn't try to dress it up. Life is good, life is fine, I'm hiding in a cave. Oh, things are great, I'm on the run from the law. Oh, I'm so blessed that this man wants my head on his spike. He doesn't do that. He just says right up front, who is the light of my salvation? It ain't me. I'll tell you what, I'm in the dark right now. It is God. Can I clue you in on a fact? Something maybe most of you know. You look like a pretty put together group of folks, okay? So if I'm kind of plowing a furrow that you've heard before, just forgive me for a minute. Christianity is not an easy thing. Life isn't an easy thing. The purpose of life, the purpose of faith, is not to be necessarily comfortable all the time. It is not to be relaxed all the time. It is not to look good or to have all the answers. The purpose of life, the purpose of faith, is much larger than that. And we do a great deal of damage to people when, well-intentioned, we try to market Christianity as just another version of self-help. 12 easy lessons. You do this and the skies will open up and it'll rain orders on you. No, that's not true. That doesn't happen in the Bible. Even when it does rain manna from heaven, they're still out in the desert, they're still in the wilderness. Just come to church, just read this book, just join this group, just make this pledge. And somehow, like some infomercial, everything is supposed to work out fine. But what? Jesus died. Right? Jesus was murdered. If we call ourselves little Christs, if we call ourselves chips off the old Christological block, should we expect any different? There is going to be resistance. There is going to be struggle. Whether you're in the church or not, by the way, that's going to happen, okay? But that's just it. That's just it. There are seasons in life, and some of them are winter. Some of them are bleak. Some of them are cold. And so the best thing to do is not to pretend otherwise. It is to go outside and look it in the eye and say, yeah, that's my life, and to jump into it. If you want a form of denial to make yourself comfortable and cozy, look, there's a lot of them you can do. Crystal meth. Do crystal meth, okay? Just medicate yourself into oblivion, and you won't have to deal with it. Or move into one of these perfect playing communities where nothing ever goes wrong because the zoning laws make it so. Do that, okay? But if you really want to live life, you just got to own up to the fact that sometimes life's hard. Life's difficult. There is not enough whitewash to put on that thing sometimes to make it look good. That is not only what I am taught, but that's what I see happening over and over again in the lives of people who take their faith seriously. Not only here in the present, but in times past. Paul was stoned. Jonah was swallowed by a whale. David had to look a giant in the eye. Mary had to figure out, how am I going to raise this kid without a father? The early church had to figure out what to do when Rome cracked down on them. These were not people whose lives were resolved in 29 minutes and 2 commercials. But their lives were real. They were real. And if you want a real life, at some point, you just got to shed all these illusions and all this notion that it's all about me. And you got to go out there and you got to jump into it. Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm crazy. Maybe I got some frostbite. I don't know. But that's what it seems to me that David is saying when he says, the Lord is the light of my salvation. This is a rough patch in my life, and I don't see much light. So please, let the light shine on me. There's another reason why I went and jumped in that pond, and that is because other people were watching. 5 people from Wabash were watching, okay? Something I learned from the Marine Corps is most of the things that we do in this life that we call courage are just stuff that we do because we're more afraid to look bad not doing it than doing it. It's easier to go over the side of the trench when your buddies are going than it is by yourself. Same way, I had to go because they were going, and they had to go because I was going, and if any one of us ran, the others would have run too, but we would have blamed each other first. That's kind of the way that would work. Built into that is something that, again, we many times forget about our faith, and that is that even when we face those rough patches in life, we do not face them alone. There's a person you probably never heard of. It's been a long, long time since John of the Cross wrote what he called the Ascent to Mount Carmel. He's the one who first coined the phrase, the dark night of the soul. He was the first one to really reflect on the way that sometimes our greatest blessings come to us in those rough patches of life. Sometimes the place God is most at work in our lives is not in the light, but is actually in the darkness. We may not see God in those moments, but that does not mean that God is there. It means many times that's where God is most at work, because we are most helpless. We are more likely to put ourselves completely in His hands, because nothing else works. You remember that story I told you guys about learning to do combat swim qualifications? Had to float face down. That's my dark night of the soul. I had to finally say, okay, if I drown, I drown. I trust in something larger than myself. I have to let go of my preoccupation of self-survival if I'm going to survive. I don't think that's unique to me. I think most of us experience that every once in a while. You ever heard of Mother Teresa? Mother Teresa never spoke about it in her life, but her journals are replete with accounts of what David talks about. Let your light shine on me because I'm in the dark, and I believe that you're here with me too. Mother Teresa mentioned how when she first took holy orders, she had a profound religious experience. She was infused with the grace of God, and then it stopped for the rest of her life. That spiritual ecstasy that she had for a moment was gone, and she lived the rest of her life saying, let it come again. I'm tired of spiritual winter. Let the spring come again. Let the sap rise. This godly woman who did so many things and that most of us look at as a spiritual giant felt about that big throughout much of her life. And what enabled her to go through that decade-long period was the fact that she understood, I do not go through it alone. This is the dark night of the soul. Remember how we do this in the Psalm 23? Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for your rod and your staff comfort me. I don't walk through the darkness by myself. You walk through it with me. You take care of me. Have you ever been on an extended job search? You know what this is like. You fill out the application. Oh God, please let this work. Let this work. If you've ever been in love with someone and you don't know whether they're going to return your love in kind, you're kind of there, right? Oh, please let this work. There's not enough mouthwash and shoe polish in the world to make me pretty. This is in somebody else's hands. Oh God, please be with me. If you've ever had a child, or you've had a parent turn into a child, if you've ever been stuck anywhere, any place, if you've ever been snowed in a blizzard, you know that life goes on because something else makes it go on. Now, I do not mean to imply, by any means, that God afflicts people with disease or death or depression. I don't think God sits up there polishing the ends of a scourge and thinks, I'll give them to it this time. No, I don't. But I do think that God is so smart and so capable that he can use things like that. God can speak to us through a hangover. God can speak to us through a smashed thumb that we just flatten with our hammer. God can speak to us in our failures that we have brought upon ourselves and enable us to see, hey, there is more. There is so much more than you. There is me. Trust me. Indeed, in this situation, really, what other choice do you have but to trust me? Lent is kind of a primer for this. We do all these strange things in Lent. We talk about the crucifixion. We take Lenten vows upon ourselves, whatever it is. I'll give up coffee or tobacco or liquor or going to church or whatever it is that you choose to make your Lenten vow. We don't do these things for ourselves. We do these things because we understand that God is at work in the darkness. There was one other reason, by the way, I jumped into the pond. And I don't really think that needs a whole lot of explanation. And I can't say that I had anything to do with it, but I would like to point out that a week ago it was 90 degrees, and yesterday it was 70 degrees. I was the only guy in West Lafayette who had shorts on, had no hair on from here down. Okay, it was all frozen off the week before, but you know. But I was happy. This is not a cult of depression. We do not believe in a cruel or capricious God. We believe, as David did, that ultimately we will be delivered. The rough patches will go away. What does it say in Revelation 21? Behold, I make all things new. I bank on that. I trust on that. It may not necessarily happen in our time frame. It may not necessarily happen in our specs, but happen it will. God does deliver us. But here's the kicker. Here's the kicker, okay? What God ultimately delivers us from isn't Saul. It isn't the squalid conditions we find ourselves in. It isn't the cold water down in Kokomo. What God ultimately delivers us from is our greatest enemy, ourselves. That, it seems to me, is the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. And that, I know, is the end of this lesson. I'll see you next year down in Kokomo. Let's pray.